Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. This is a review of WrestleMania 8, and by no way is this the best WrestleMania of all time, but I think of a lot of the WrestleManias, this is probably the one WrestleMania that holds a special place in my heart. Definitely WrestleMania 6, Warrior versus Hogan is right up there with a lot of people's. Hogan versus Savage is a really good one, but when I look at the card for WrestleMania 8, I know you look at it and there's a lot of guys that had been working for the company for a long time. They weren't with the company anymore, and there's a lot of fresh blood on the roster on this show. But honestly, this is my childhood. This would be 1992, so I would be 11 years old. I would be watching about every wrestling program there was on television at the time, from Wrestling Challenge to Wrestling Superstars, All-American Wrestling, Prime Time, any kind of a match I could see. I wanted to see it, even if it was, the Repo Man going up against the guy who delivered beer to the arena that day. Like I said, there's nothing really special about this show. There's only, I'd say probably two really good matches that people talk about. There's one hidden gem on this show, and everything else is just, it is what it is. And when it comes down to it, you have a WrestleMania that ends in a disqualification. I know that it's supposed to usher in the new era. They're trying to redo what they did at WrestleMania 6, trying to hand the company over to the Ultimate Warrior, and have him be the guy who takes the torch and starts to run with it throughout the company. This show had a whole lot of things that were awesome about it. The first thing that comes to mind is that basically the WWF, Jack Tunney, held a press conference, basically trying to figure out who the number one contender was going to be, and you had all of the main players from the WWF up there on the stage. All were delivering promos. I can't remember what show this was on. It was probably on Prime Time or something like that, but just the way that WWF would book themselves to be having a press conference made them seem like it was a huge, big deal, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker as a kid. And you had the newcomer Sid Justice, you had Hulk Hogan, you had the Macho Man Randy Savage, you had Roddy Piper, all up there on the stage, basically trying to plead their case for trying to be the number one contender. And at this press conference, we got the plan for WrestleMania, which was going to be Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair, which in a lot of people's mind definitely should have been the main event to find out who the real world's champion was. It's been so many years later down the road, and people still talk about why Hogan versus Flair didn't main event this show, whether if it was just Flair wouldn't lose to Hogan, Hogan wouldn't lose to Flair. The story that's come out from WWF on the WrestleMania documentary was that basically they did these shows, this match on house shows, and it didn't really draw the way that they thought it was going to, and so they just decided to go in different directions. So once they had named Hogan versus Flair for the championship, Sid Justice immediately turned very jealous. He delivered a promo against Hulk Hogan, and then after a few weeks, he apologized to Hogan, and then they were booked as a tag team on Saturday night's main event. It was going to be Hogan and Sid Justice going up against Ric Flair and the Undertaker. For some reason, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, who is Hulk Hogan's real life friend, was in the corner, and during the match, Hogan got worked over by Undertaker and Flair, and then at a moment when he was supposed to make the hot tag to Sid Justice just walked out on him and left him there high and dry to get beat by Undertaker and Flair, and that was the final straw for Hulk. And Hulk ended up saying that he was going to go after Sid at WrestleMania, which left the door open, and then it ended up being Randy Savage against Ric Flair. At this time in WWF Magazine, Ric Flair was publishing these pictures saying that Miss Elizabeth was basically having an affair on Randy Savage. It ended up being a huge, sort of rouge on everybody. But, as a kid, I'm reading WWF Magazine, and here's these pictures of Flair and Miss Elizabeth, sitting poolside, sitting in their robes. I didn't know what Photoshop was. So, to me, honestly, this was the best stuff of all time. The backdoor sort of things that I've heard from listening to shoot interviews and things like that is when Sid left WCW, he was one of the biggest stars there was in wrestling. And when you see Sid tower over Hogan in the main event, you see how big this guy is. You definitely could tell that people in the wrestling business knew that this guy was money. And when Vince took Sid and signed him, he promised him to be in the WrestleMania main event. So with having Hogan versus Flair, what could you do with Sid to put him into the WrestleMania main event? I really think this is the reason why Vince had to change things around, is basically Sid went to Vince and was like, hey, look, you promised me this. You better deliver or it's breach of contract and I'm out of here. And I think this was the only way to really save it. But when you watch that press conference and Sid flips his lid, and he's doing his thing for the camera, giving an awesome promo. I do think that was the plan. So I'm a little bit lost. Maybe sometimes we say they're stupid, and then when it all works out in the end, they look like $1 million. So it is what it is. But to get to the show itself, the show opened with Shawn Michaels going up against El Matador. This was a really, really good match. At this time, Shawn was with Sensational Sherry. Sherry sung the I think he's cute. That sort of theme song. This is a really good match that doesn't really get talked about. When I talked about there was a hidden gem on here, this wasn't even the match that I was talking about, but this is a good one. Tito Santana, always one of my favorite wrestlers. Real good stuff. Shawn ends up getting the win in this one, and then from there we go to The Undertaker against Jake Roberts. Jake Roberts delivers a great promo. It's one of those ones where basically he talks for a little bit and he starts to get real quiet, so basically you have to really focus in on what he's saying. And even at one point in the promo, he just stops talking and is just looking at the camera. And he's not saying anything to me, but I'm scared for my life. I really believe that he's going to kick my ass after he kicks The Undertaker's ass tonight. Taker goes out there, ends up getting the win. He ends up giving the tombstone to Jake Roberts on outside of the ring, on the floor, and then rolling him back inside of the ring and getting the 1, 2, 3, which ended up getting Undertaker and Paul Bearer a lot of heat with Vince for doing the move. But Jake is the one who told him to do it. But Undertaker, being the guy he is, never told on Jake. It was actually Paul Bearer who would tell that story years later during a shoot interview after leaving the WWE. From there we go to one of the best matches on the show, Bret Hart going up against Roddy Piper. Bret Hart had lost the Intercontinental Championship to the Mountie after getting shocked with the shock stick. And then at the Royal Rumble, Roddy Piper ended up getting the win, fighting for the Hart family. Word came out that Piper actually was a distant relative of the Harts. And they did this whole thing basically talking about how Piper and Hart grew up together, even though it seems like Piper is at least 10 years older than Bret Hart is. And Bret Hart delivers a promo before the match saying that he's going to beat him, and Piper's right there with him. Piper's sort of putting down Bret. He's trying to lighten up the mood, talking about the fact that, Miss Hart used to make him bologna sandwiches. There'd only be one piece of bologna in there. And just, short little, cheap shots like that. And then basically Bret, challenges Piper to a fight. And Piper says, why would I want to beat you up here when it's just me, you, and Gene, when I can beat you up out there in the middle of the Hoosier Dome in front of 70,000 people, and they can all see it. And then basically Piper tries to walk out on Bret. And then Bret grabs his arm and turns around like he's going to punch him. And he holds it out there like, I could have got you. And that's when Piper pulls his hand out from behind the belt, and he had wrapped his belt around his fist, and he was like, no, I would have had you just don't know it. It's just sort of like the old dog with the new tricks. These guys go out there. The story of the night is that WWF had put a ban on blood. Bret Hart ended up bleeding anyways. And it's pretty obvious that he did it, but he always told Bret always told Vince that he did it the hard way. Bret ends up winning with a backslide, 1, 2, 3, ends up becoming the Intercontinental Champion. And I think he's one of the best Intercontinental Champions that the company's ever had. From there we go to an 8-man tag team match, which is really built around the Family Feud, with the Family Feud announcer being out there in the ring, cutting sort of a promo on the heels. The heels try to run at the announcer, but the babyfaces make the save. It's Boss Man, Virgil, Slaughter, and Duggan beating the Nasty Boys, Repo Man, and Mountie. Basically, the match where you just try and get everybody onto the card. Nothing big there. From there, we go to the World Heavyweight Championship match. This is the match basically where Ric Flair said that once he won, he was going to release. He wasn't saying that they were nude pictures, but he had revealing pictures of Miss Elizabeth that were going to, be pulled down once he won the match and shown to the world at the Hoosier Dome. When they tore that place down, I bet those pictures were still hanging up in the rafters up there, because Savage ends up getting the win. A really, really good match. Ric Flair ended up blading in this match and ended up getting a big fine from Vince McMahon. He bladed so bad that his blonde hair turned red by the end of the match. Lots of blood in this one. But Savage ends up getting the win after Miss Elizabeth comes running down to ringside. And Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth, who were breaking up at the time in real life, had a great moment of being together and celebrating him being champion again. This championship reign would be short-lived. He would drop it back to Ric Flair, I think on a television show. I think it would be on primetime with I think Razor Ramon ended up being involved in that match. But good stuff. Tatanka beats Rick Martel in a really, really good match. The Natural Disasters beat Money Inc. when Money Inc. just flat out walks out on the Natural Disasters and just says, "Hey, we'll live to fight another day. We ain't living now." In a short match that I don't even remember seeing last night, Owen Hart beats Skinner. Minute and 30 seconds. I probably just walked out of the room before that match and didn't even realize that I missed anything. But then in the main event, Hulk Hogan, in what was billed as supposed to be Hulk Hogan's last WrestleMania, his last match, they would do a retirement angle, basically saying that Hogan was going to be walking away from the company. Of course, he would stay away from the company, I think, all the way until the build-up to WrestleMania 9, where Hogan would be in a tag team match, sort of just to be on the show and help it out, but not really be in there. And at the last minute, Vince decides to put the championship, one of the dark spots that there is on WrestleMania 9. But Hulk Hogan, is saying that it's going to be it. He's going up for the last fight against Sid Justice. When you look at Sid Justice, you can really tell that this guy really is the face of the company. He should be the babyface guy, taking them on. And I think that Vince turning him heel was a bad idea, but maybe he was going to turn him heel and then turn him babyface just right down the road. But he looked like $1 million. He had a really good promo. I think he was better as a heel promo than he was at a regular promo. But in this one, basically it's a normal Hulk Hogan match. Hogan and Justice go round and round, and then when Hulk Hogan is going for the atomic leg drop, and he's going for the 1, 2, 3, Harvey Wimpleman, his manager, jumps into the ring, causing a disqualification. And at that point, you can really tell that everything is sort of lost. During the fight, after the match, once it's called out a disqualification, Papa Shango starts running down the aisle and then stops halfway and looks around like he doesn't even know where he is. And then he runs all the way down to the ring. People have said that Harvey Wimpleman wasn't even supposed to be the guy who caused the disqualification. It was supposed to be Papa Shango, but there was a mix-up with sending the guys out on time, and just the whole thing was a big clusterfuck. And you can really tell that it is by looking at Hogan and Sid and Wimpleman, especially the referee, and Papa Shango the most. But Shango and Sid start working over on Hulk Hogan, and then as Sid is on the outside looking for a chair, you can hear the Ultimate Warrior music start to play, and it's playing loud. And I think it's funny that Sid doesn't even acknowledge the Warrior music. He doesn't sell it. The guys that he's trying to steal the chair for, they're not even looking or acknowledging that the Warrior's music is playing. Warrior's music is very... It's his. I mean, you know what it is. When it started playing, you knew. The announcers knew. Warrior makes his way down to the ring. Warrior and Hogan clear the ring, and then they just sort of celebrate with each other, holding the hands up. This is supposed to be the passing of the torch. Vince had sent Warrior home, and they were on bad terms. And I think because of the plan for Hogan to leave and go make movies, he needed to have somebody to carry the business, and he wasn't 100% sure that guys like Savage and Flair and Sid were going to be able to do it. So returning the Ultimate Warrior would be a great thing. This, of course, would be the point when the Warrior death rumors would come up saying that it's a fake Warrior, but it was the right Warrior. I love this WrestleMania. It's one of the best ones of my childhoods, and I had great memories watching it last night, and I hope you guys do soon.